Hi, I'm Terry Butchie from Ohio State Math Literacy Initiative, and today we're going to talk about multiplying fractions. So I know a lot of people don't like fractions, but they're really pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about how we can play with them. What are the ideas behind multiplying fractions? So a lot of times when we're learning something that we think is difficult or something new, sometimes we'll look at a simpler problem first. So let's say if we want to know what, if we want to know what 2/3 times 4/5 is, if that's where we want to end up, we could start by really talking about, well, what is 3 times 4? Let's have just two whole numbers and think about what do we do when they're two whole numbers, because we're going to do the same kind of thing when they're fractions. It's basically the same idea. So what does 3 times 4 mean? It means 3 groups of 4. Now you want to ask your student or child that just to make sure that they know what it means. Don't tell them what it means. Say, what does that mean, 3 times 4? And then if we can draw a picture of it, so we have, here's one group of 4, another group of 4, and another group of 4. So we have 3 groups of 4, which altogether that gives us 12. So we can figure out what we get when we have 3 groups of 4. So now let's think about using that in the next kind of simpler multiplication of fractions number. So let's say we have, okay, we know how to find 3 times 4. Let's find 3 times a half. What would 3 times a half be? So let's use the same kind of reasoning that we've used in the previous run. So 3 times a half, that means, and always write down the narrative. That means the sentence. Write that down because that helps your students to really get the grasp. It doesn't mean forever and always they're going to have to write down 3 groups of a half. It's just a good practice to get them in. So 3 groups of 1/2. That's what that means. So if we wanted to draw a picture of that, what would 3 groups of 1/2 look like? So first we have to know what a half looks like. So I'm going to make my square. There's a half. I have 2 parts and one of them is colored in. Remember when we talked about fractions before, remember where those numbers come from. So we have a denominator and we have a numerator. So remember we talked about the base of these words. So this is num, and we talked about what num meant. So num means the name, or excuse me, the number. I'll look at that. Number. So the number. So num means the number, how many of something. Where nam means its name. What's the name of the something? So num means number, nam means name. So that's where these fraction numerator and denominator came from. So if we look at this one here, the number, the num, is 1. One of them is colored. And the name of that 1, remember, how do we name each of these pieces? Well, it's a whole that's broken into 2 parts. So this is 1/2. 1 out of the name halves. Okay, so we have that 1/2. Here's another half. And there's another half. So now, just like we had our 3 groups of 4, we have these 4 groups here. We have 3 groups of half. So there's a half, there's a half, and there's a half. If we put that all together, if we put that 3.5 all together, I'm going to take this one, this half, and I'm going to move that down here. I'm just going to fill that in. So now we've already taken care of that. So what do we get? Well, here's a whole. And what do we have here? A whole and a half. So, and that's what we get when we do that. Now let's just talk a little bit about what if it went the other way? So what if the question was 1/2 times 3? What do you think would happen then? 1/2 times 3. Let's think about it for a second. What do you think? What do you think? Well, let's write the narrative just like we did before. So that means 1/2 of a group of 3. So 1/2 of a group of 3. So let's see what that looks like. Well, here's a group of 3. So I have this, and this, and this. So there's our group of 3. We have a group of 3. What do we want out of this? We want half of it. So we can fair share that, which just means distribute it out, or we can slice it. There are all kinds of ways that you can figure out what half of this group of 3 chunks is. I'm going to just fair share it. So if I want half, that means I want 2 parts. That remember, that name part is 2. So 1/2 means I want 1 of the 2 parts. So I'm going to just pretend like here's somebody here, and here's somebody here. And this person gets this one, so that gets that one. This one gets this one. So each of them now they have a whole a whole square. And now we haven't done anything with this middle one, but I know that it has to be shared equally with my friends. So I'm going to just chop that in half, meaning we need 2 parts. And this part's going to go to that friend, and this part will go to that friend. So what does each friend get? 1/2, which is the exact same thing we got here. It's just a different way of looking at it. So if we want to look at it as 3 groups of 1/2 or as 1/2 of a group of 3, whatever seems the easiest to you. And that's also true that if you're given, let's say, I think this one's a little easier, but that's just me. It doesn't matter. So if that's the case, then you just want to let your child choose the one that he or she feels the most comfortable with. And let's say I like this better, but the problem is given in this form. I can switcheroo that. That's a legal math move. That's called using the commutative property of multiplication. So we can do that too. If you like doing one or the other, you can just switch the problem around. That's a legal math move. All right, so let's look at now the one that we want to really focus on. And again, we're doing it by, so what your child already knows. So start on the foundation, get a little bit more difficult, and then let's end up with one that looks like this. So we want to know what 2/3 of 4/5 is. So that means 2/3 of a group of 4/5. All right, so we want 2/3 of a group of 4/5. So here's one group of 4/5. So I split it. What does 4/5 mean? Remember, 4 is how many. So we want 4 of these. That's the how many. And then the 5, remember, tells us its name. Or what are these pieces called? Well, each of them is a 5th because we split this up into 5ths. All right, so now we have our 4/5, but we don't want all of that 4/5. We really only want 2/3 of those 4/5. So we look at this, and how could we do that? Well, let's look back at what we did here. We split them up into halves. So we're going to do that same thing here. Now, I'm going to split them up into thirds, but I'm going to split them up into thirds going horizontally. If you watch the adding fractions video, then you'll know what I mean by when we split it up horizontally and vertically. So we want 2/3. So I'm going to have to make this into thirds. So now I like to draw mine a little bit outside because it just helps me to remember. Also, just try to use a different color if one is available to you at home. I didn't do a very good job of making these equal, but they should be the same size. So now I want 2/3. Well, this is 1/3. So remember, the whole is this rectangle here. So here's 1/3 of that, and here's 2/3 of that. And so the whole thing would be 3/3. That would be the whole thing. But we only want 2/3. So we want to know what this one is and this one is. So we have how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I answered again that question. Remember, numerator is number, how many? So we have 8. And then remember, denominator is name. So that means 8 whats. What is it that we have here? So in our fraction, the denominator, name, and we have to figure out what the new name is, because we changed the size of the pieces when we use those horizontal lines. So now we have to figure out what's the name of each of these pieces. So we know we have 8 of them, but what's their name? So we have a 5 here, 5 here, and 5 here. So that's 3 5s, or 15. So what is 2/3 of a group of 4/5? 8, 15. Let's do another one of these. So I'm not going to rewrite our first 2 stages. We'll just go into another one of the multiplication problems. So let's start off. Let's do this one. 3/4 times 1/8. So what does that mean? What does 3/4 times 1/8 mean? It could mean 3/4 of a group of 1/8. 3/4 of a group of 1/8. If you don't like doing it that way, our commutative property says we can also look at this. So we could also look at 1/8 of a group of 3/4. You don't have to do them both ways, but it's always those has to have 2. So, and it's easier to make fractions in a square too, by the way. So we have our 8s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we have one of those. So according to our question, we have 1/8. All right, so that's what we have to start with. Now we want 3/4 of this. So again, we have 8s going this way. We want to look at 3/4 of this. So I'm going to split it again horizontally, and I'm going to split it into how many equal parts? 4, because that's the name of the fraction. So I'm going to split this into 4s. So I'm going to do this, this, and this. So remember, these are the 4s. So they span and they go through the whole row. So what do we want? We want 1/4. Here's 1/4. Here's another 4th. We want 3 of those, 3/4. So that means this one, and this one. Well, what do we have when we want those 3 that I've circled? We have 1, 2, 3. That's how many? How many of those pink ones are in this whole thing? And then now we have to figure out, okay, what's the name of that piece? What's the name of that one? Well, I know I have 8 going this way, and I have 4 going this way, so that's 32. So 3 32s, or 3 32nds. All right, let's do it. This going in this direction. Should we get the right answer? Same answer? Yes, we should. So let's prove it. All right, so now we want to find out what 1/8 of a group of 3/4 is. So first we have to have our 3/4. Just like when we were doing our other problems, you start off with what they give you. So we put in our 3 groups of 4. In this case, we're saying shaded. So here's our 3. So now we have 3/4. And then what do we want? We want 1/8 of that group of 3/4. So 1/8, that means I'm going to have to split this into 8s. So I'm going to go, so now I'm at 4ths. So I'm going to make 8s. All right. Now, how many of these eighths? So remember, this is an eighth. This is an eighth. Each one of these is an eighth. Each one of these going in here is an eighth. We only want one of them. Only one. So that means just this row right here. So how many of those pieces are colored out of that 1/8? So we have 3 that are colored. 1, 2, 3. And now we have to give it its name. So what is its name? Well, we have 4 this direction, 4 columns, and we have 8 rows. So that means we have 32 altogether. So again, play around with the directionality of your problem when you're doing multiplication of fractions, because sometimes it just seems easier going the other direction. So this is multiplication of fractions. I'm happy to do, we'll get into subtraction and some division of fractions also. And try to make fractions fun. Your students need you to be okay and smiling about it, because I know if they don't think you like it, then they're probably not going to like it either. So put a grin on your face and have fun with fractions. Thanks for joining me, and I'll hope to see you soon.